Welcome everyone to the fifth Sri Lankan Power BI Meetup. We're in February, and today we have a very special guest with us. We have Webb, who is a principal program manager at on the Microsoft Power BI custom advisory team at Microsoft. Along with him, we also have Nilhan Perera, who works at Fortude, who will be following up with the session afterwards. Chris today is going to talk about DirectQuery for Power BI on Power BI Datasets and Azure Analysis Services. It's a feature that a lot of us are excited about. So he will take us through that session. So let's move over to Chris. Chris, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me share my slides and let me double check that you can see me before I carry on.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. All right. Well, I've already been introduced, but let me introduce myself again. My name's Chris. I work on something called the Power BI Customer Advisory team at Microsoft. And that means that I work on the Power BI product group, but I don't actually build the Power BI product. I do two things. I help customers with their Power BI implementations, and I make sure that we get the feedback from customers and pass it back to the rest of the Power BI product group. I'm a long-standing blogger about all things Power BI and Microsoft BI, so check out my blog and follow me on Twitter if you want. All right. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about what I think is perhaps the most anticipated, exciting feature in the whole of Power BI's history. If Marco and Alberto are calling this a historic milestone, this is something that you should be very excited about. So one of my goals today is to explain what this feature is, DirectQuery on live connections, and help you understand how it can be used. Another goal of this presentation is to maybe tone down the hype a little bit and be a little bit more realistic about what you can and can't do with this feature. Because there is always a danger with a feature like this that people get really, really excited about it and use it for things that we don't think it should be used for. So it's going to be a realistic, practical session today. I will be trying to get you excited, of course, if you don't know what DirectQuery on live connections is, but I also want to make sure you don't get too excited and do something that we don't expect you to do. Now, before we carry on, I'm going to start talking, I'm going to explain some terms. This is one of those features that people who know Power BI really well will get immediately. But if you don't know Power BI really well, it's very easy to get confused. So I'm going to spend a few minutes at the beginning talking about some Power BI terms and features that you probably know about. And I will also introduce some new terms for this particular feature that maybe you don't understand. But it's going to be very important that I explain these terms before I start doing any demos. Then we can talk about why this feature is so useful, when you're going to want to use it. We will see lots of demos all through. We will see how you can use it to add measures, do calculated columns, join data from different data sources, and so on and so forth. And then towards the end, we will talk about some more advanced topics about performance, security, and where we want to go with this feature in the long run. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. Now, I know that some of you will know all of this, but some of you may not, and it's going to be really important to understand these terms before we go to the actual feature we want to talk about. In Power BI, there are two fundamental ways that you can store data. You can use import mode and you can use direct query mode. In import mode, you copy the data from your data source and store it in memory inside Power BI's own Vertipack engine, the same engine that, for example, Azure Analysis Services uses, or you can use direct query mode. With direct query mode, the data stays in the data source, but Power BI queries it when a report runs. It generates queries on demand. Now, any table, at least right now, can be either import mode or direct query mode. But in Power BI, all of the data sits inside something called a dataset. A dataset is a collection of tables bound together with relationships, with measures and other metadata in there. And different tables inside a dataset can be either direct query or import mode. This didn't used to be the case in the past, and it's still the case with certain older versions of Azure of analysis services on premises. All of your tables had to be import, all of them had to be direct query, but that's not the case now with Azure analysis, with Power BI at least, because now we have something called composite models, and a composite model is where different tables in your data set use different storage modes. The third thing to mention is that we also have this concept of live connections in Power BI. In Power BI, there is always a data set. Whenever you have a report, that report always has to get its data from a data set. And the tables in the data set, as I said, can be either direct query or import mode. But when you create a new report in Power BI Desktop, by default, you get to create a data set and a report, but you can create what's called a live connection. So with Power BI, if you open a new Power BI file to create a report, you don't have to create a data set for it. In fact, it's a good practice to say, well, I've already created a data set in some other Power BI file. I've published it up to the service. And now when I'm creating my new Power BI report, I can simply create what's called a live connection to a published Power BI data set, use the data in that data set to build my report. So live connections can either be to data sets that are published in the Power BI service, or they can be to Azure Analysis Services. You can also create a live connection to an on-prem analysis services model or SAP HANA or BW. So there we go. We know about storage modes and composite models and live connections. And just to visualize that, in import mode, you've got the data stored in your data set in memory, but there is a data set and the data set holds the data. And when your report runs, you run a DAX query from your report to the data set. The data is queried in the data set. The results go back to the report. In direct query mode, when your report generates a DAX query against the data set in turn generates what we call a native query. Generally speaking, that's a SQL query. If you're working against a relational database like SQL Server, that gets the data from the relational data source. That is returned. I've got my arrows in the wrong order. That gets returned from the relational database back to the dataset, and the dataset then returns the data you need as a DAX query back to the report. As I said, composite models allow you to mix and match. And live connections allow you to create reports from either Azure Analysis Services or published datasets. So what's the new feature we've got? In the past, up until the December release of Power BI Desktop, direct query was only possible with certain types of data sources. Now, generally speaking, these were relational data sources. That's not strictly true because there are some other data sources like Azure Data Explorer, which are not relational databases, which did support direct query. But 9 times out of 10, when you were talking about direct query, it was on top of a relational data source. Now, since December 2020, we can do direct query on top of a published Power BI dataset as well. That means that we've got a feature called Direct Query on Live Connections, which is the official name for the feature that I'm talking about. And this, in turn, means that we can have composite models on top of either Power BI datasets or Azure Analysis Services databases. It's not supported yet on on-prem analysis services or SAP HANA or BW. So we've now got direct query on live connections, and this is something that was not possible before. And what this means is that when you build a report, you are still always connected to a data set, and you are still always connected to just one data set. It's just that that data set can now be a composite model. And that composite model, instead of having tables in DirectQuery mode that go to a relational database, can now have tables in DirectQuery mode which go back to a published Power BI dataset or an Azure Analysis Services model. So we're still only ever connecting to a single dataset, but that dataset can now be a composite model which gets data from other published datasets or Azure Analysis Services databases. This means that we've got some new terminology, which is important to learn before we carry on. We have something called islands of data. And this is something that when I do my first demo in a moment will become clearer. But if you're thinking about the data set that I'm connecting to from my report, that can have tables of data in it. Now those tables of data can either be inside the data set, or they can be DirectQuery tables that point to tables in another data set. But if you're thinking about the tables within a single data set, those comprise what's called an island of tables. Tables that live together in the same data set are said to exist in the same island. There's some other functionality that we need to, some other terminology that we'll need to talk about. The data set that I connect to from my report, and there's, like I said, only ever one data set that I can connect to from my report, is what I'm going to call a local data set. You'll hear sometimes people calling this a proxy model. That's what we've called it internally inside Microsoft, but the official name is going to be a local data set. If that local data set is a composite model that contains tables in DirectQuery mode that are linked to another data set, that other data set in the separate island is a remote data set. Okay, so we've heard an awful lot of terminology. It's probably quite confusing. Let's do a demo. So let me stop presenting. Come back my mouse. And let me present from my desktop. So hopefully you can see Power BI desktop now. If you can't, shout. This is an empty Power BI desktop file, so there is nothing in it yet. I haven't started to do anything.
Chris, on
Yep.
your team, you can see your desktop.
Okay. Come on, share content. Let me know when you can see. Can you see now?
Not yet.
Yes. Tell me when you can, because Teams is saying that I'm sharing.
Okay. Are you sharing the
yeah, I'm sharing
only or the screen?
No, I'm sharing the whole desktop. So let me maybe come on. Let me try one more time. Let me just try. Oh, I want to share the whole screen. Come on. Let me see if this works now. I've got the red line around everything. Can you see it yet?
Still no.
All right.
That's strange.
Okay, let me just try sharing the window with Power BI Desktop in. This should work just as well. Can you see that?
Still no. Yes, sorry.
Wonderful. All right. Come on, let me just try one more time. All right. Can you see this? Maybe if I go to my browser, can you see anything?
No, just still see your video. That's it. Is there anyone else who can see?
Can anybody else see anything on my screen?
No, Chris, it's only your video.
So you see an empty screen, do you?
We just see your video.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. Let me turn off my camera and see if that helps anything. All right. This is probably my fault for trying to use that new Teams feature for...
Okay.
All right, can you see anything now? I've got the red line around Teams that should make it possible to see what's on my screen.
What we see now is your camera frozen on you.
All right, maybe let me leave and rejoin the meeting because I think perhaps Teams is having problems. I will be back in a moment, I promise.
Awesome. Okay.
All right, I'm back. Let's see if I can share now.
Yes, we can see it now.
Excellent. All right. Yeah, obviously something wrong with Teams. So this is a completely empty Power BI file. And if I go over to my browser, I've got a workspace in Power BI, and I've got some published data sets up here. So the first data set that I'm going to be connecting to is my sales source data set. It just contains some data that's been sourced from the AdventureWorks sample model. So not very interesting, but quite easy to see. So if I go to Get Data and connect to a Power BI data set, going to wait to connect to the Power BI service. I'm going to find the data set that I want to connect to in the Power BI service. And I'm going to connect to my sales source dataset. When I click Create, what's going to happen is that I'm going to create initially a live connection. So with a live connection, there is no dataset in my Power BI file, but I'm connected live up to the tables in my published dataset. So I'm going to use the new diagram view, and I'm going to add this option that will show at the appropriate point the name of the dataset that I'm connected to. So at the moment, inside this Power BI file, there is no dataset. I am connected with a live connection up to my published dataset. But now, let's say that I want to be able to do this new thing. I want to be able to create a composite model from here. The first thing that I have to do is click this button to make changes to this model. So when I click this, something magic happens. Instead of a live connection, what I need is a DirectQuery connection. And this is not only going to turn all of these tables into tables in DirectQuery mode. In order for that to happen, I have to have a local model, a local data set. So when I add this local model, a new data set is going to be created in this Power BI file here. And the tables that we see here are going to be created as DirectQuery tables inside my local data set. So I've now got a local data set inside this Power BI file on desktop, and I've got a remote data set sitting inside the Power BI service. Now, at the moment, this doesn't really give me anything that I couldn't do already with a live connection. What I can do now, though, is add my own data to this data set, because this is now just a local data set with a composite model. So if I connect to SQL Server, let's bring some new data in. I'm going to connect in import mode. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to add a new dimension table. So on the Internet Sales table, there is a customer key column, which can be joined to a customer dimension table. There is no customer dimension table in my remote data set, But if I go to here and go to dim customer, I'm going to just transform data. I can import data in the way that I would normally expect. I'm just going to do a little bit of cleanup. Let's grab some useful columns like English education, English occupation, remove other columns. I could tidy up the names, I'm not going to bother, but I'm just going to import this data. And this will be the first table in this local data set that actually contains any data. All of the other tables, remember, are in direct query mode that points to tables elsewhere. And we can actually see which tables are in which island. There are two islands now. These islands with the blue headers, sorry, these tables with the blue headers are all in the same island, which is the island of tables in my single remote data set. This table with no blue header is an island in itself, the only table in my local data set. Now, in order to be able to do anything useful with this, of course, I need to build a relationship between these two tables, and I can now do that by just dragging and dropping in the normal way. So I want to join on customer key, click OK, and there we are. Okay, so I've got all the tables in my local data set. I can now build something in my report. Let's build a table. I've got some measures in my remote data set, internet sales amount and internet tax amount. I'm getting the data from the remote data set only at the moment. And there are my values. Let's say that I want to bring calendar year into this table. This is again another column from my remote data set. Let's not summarize that. And there are my years. So far, all of the data is coming from my remote data set, but now I can bring in something from my local data set like occupation, add this as a slicer, and now I can filter on English occupation, and you can see the numbers from my remote data set change. So this is the basic demo of a direct query on composite models. So this is what everybody is so excited about. Let's carry on doing this the old-fashioned way. All right, so what does this actually mean? Why is everybody so excited about this? Well, this allows a kind of compromise that was never possible before. In the world of BI, there has always been this tension between two extremes. There has been corporate BI on one side and self-service BI on the other. Now, corporate BI is the way that people always used to do BI in the dim and distant past. When the business wanted some reports, they went to the IT department. And the IT department said, yes, we're going to build a data warehouse. We're going to model everything with a dimensional model. And then we will build the reports that you want. We'll write the SQL. We'll design these reports in something like SQL Server reporting services. And we will build you a beautifully engineered, reliable, robust reporting solution. And this was great, except that the business realized that IT was very slow to react. It might take years and years and lots of money to build that data warehouse and to install that reporting system and to build all the reports. And somebody in the business would say, but I need a report for Monday. And they would go to the IT department, and the IT department would say, yes, we can build that report, but we're very busy right now, so you've got to wait for another couple of months. So it was a beautifully engineered solution, but it was often very slow and expensive to develop, and it couldn't react to the business needs. So what happened was, in turn, we had self-service BI. Now, we've always had self-service BI. People have always built reports in Access and Excel. But then, 10, 15 years ago, tools like Tableau suddenly started to appear, And these made it easy for business users to build their own reports. Now, that solved the problem of making it easy for business users to build their own reports, but these solutions were often decentralized, unreliable, difficult to support, led to multiple versions of the truth. Maybe people made mistakes when they were designing data, and they had all of the problems that corporate BI didn't, and all of the advantages that corporate BI didn't. So you were stuck with these two opposites, and you could never get the best of both worlds. But this new feature called DirectQuery on Live Connections allows a compromise. So what it allows you to do is to have your IT department build that single centralized data set with clean data containing all of the important data and calculations and modeling that you need. And in a lot of cases, just creating a live connection to that gives what you need to build a report. But in those scenarios where you really do need to do self-service, and there are so many cases where people say, well, I love your centralized data set, but I just want to add this extra bit of data, or I want to add my own calculations, or I want to be able to customize things my own way. DirectQuery on Live Connections allows you to do that for the first time. So you can take the best of what the IT department, the BI pros have built for you and shared with your whole organization, and then you can customize it and add your own data without compromising the integrity of that central model, and without duplicating data, without duplicating calculations, and so on and so forth. So you have that power of the enterprise semantic data set, and somebody can come along and build their own local data set with their own local data. And this can happen as many times as you want. So this customization, this flexibility is super, super important, and exactly why everybody is excited. Now, what does this mean in practical terms? What are the things you can do? So I've already shown how you can connect to a published data set and import your own table, build a relationship between it, between the data that you've imported and that remote data set. There are various other things that we can do here. You can also connect to multiple published data sets, and that's something I'll talk about in a moment. But apart from creating relationships between the table you've just imported and the remote data set, you can build your own measures, you can build calculated columns, you can rename things, you can create calculated tables, or, well, I can, you can't yet, but that's coming next month in Power BI Desktop. And you can do all kinds of other cool stuff. So let's do another demo and show that. So here we are in Power BI Desktop again. And you can see that my relationship's working, and I'm using some measures in my remote data set. But what happens if I want to create a measure in my local data set and mix and match that with some measures in my remote data set? Well, I can do that. So remember, dim customer is the table that I imported. I can create a measure here. And let's say that we are interested in comparing the number of customers that in our selection, the number of possible customers you've got a particular occupation with the number of customers who actually bought something and doing some kind of percentage share. So I can create a measure here, and let's just zoom in here. Let's call this number of potential customers, and I'm going to use count rows on dim customer, which is, remember, the table that I imported. So here is my measure on dim customer. Let's just drag that into here. And this now shows me the number of customers in each occupation. I can now go to internet sales. Let's build a measure and call this number of buying customers. And we'll do a distinct count on internet sales customer key. And again, let's drag that. This, of course, is a measure in my local data set against oh, actually, I brought the same one in wrong. Let me just bring number of buying customers in. That's what I've just added. So there's number of buying customers. And now I can create a measure that combines data from the two of them. So I can create a third measure here. And we could call this percent buying customers. Let's do divide between number of buying customers, number of potential customers. So this is a measure that gets data from the table that is in my local data set and from the data in my remote data set. Let's format this as a percentage. And let's just drag that in here. And there we go. I've got a measure that gets data from my remote data set, my local data set, and combines the two. So this is the most exciting, interesting thing, I think. We can also create calculated columns. This is something new and something quite interesting. So for example, on my date table, which is in my remote data set, I've got days, months, and years. But let's say I want to add a new calculated column on here. This is something that wasn't possible with a live connection before. I'm going to create a new column on here. And let's just say, let's call this a type. And we can say if date.day name equals Saturday, or day name equals Sunday, weekend, otherwise it will be a weekday. So I've now got a calculated column. This calculated column only exists in my local data set. I haven't changed the remote data set, but it's still a calculated column on a table in my remote data set. And I can go back and let's drag that into here as a slicer and filter on weekends and weekdays. And you can see that it changes the data again. I can create calculated tables as of the February release, which you guys don't have yet. And I could also, if I wanted, and again, this is something that I'd love to show, but unfortunately isn't working in the build of Power BI desktop that I got working. I can create another composite model on, if I was to publish this particular Power BI file as a data set, I could create another composite model on top of that. So I can have composite models that sit on top of composite models that sit on composite models. Now there's a restriction at the moment when this is working that you can't like chain too many together, but you can imagine the possibilities. So loads of interesting technical possibilities. But when do we actually intend this to be used, and when don't we expect this to be used? Well, the intended use, and the one that we want to encourage at the moment, is similar to the scenario that I've just shown you, where you are connecting to a single remote data set and you want to bring in one or two small tables, the kind of data volumes that you might get in Excel, maybe no more than a couple of thousand rows, and just add those in your local model. So adding new dimension tables, adding things that allow you to kind of perhaps do groups or add extra information to a dimension, or maybe just add a new small dimension table. It is also possible to create a proxy a local data set that connects to multiple published data sets. And, quite often people ask me, hey, Chris, how can I have a single Power BI report that gets data from multiple published data sets? Well, you can do that as well with this feature. And you can connect to 2 remote data sets and, just have one page getting data from one data set, one page in your report getting data from another data set. The thing you do have to watch out for, though, is situations where you are creating relationships or lots of relationships between 2 or more published data sets, especially if those relationships are high cardinality. So if you're joining 2 tables with a very large number of rows in, this is where you're going to need to start to be careful with performance. And what's more, you're also going to have to watch out for data quality issues, because this feature is not magic. It's not going to solve all of your data quality issues. And if you can't build the relationships between those tables, either because the columns you need to build those relationships aren't there, or if you don't have proper keys, or the data is dirty, you're going to run into some problems. You'll get some unexpected behavior. Let me give you an example of some of the kind of things that can go wrong. So let me go back to Power BI Desktop. Now, if we have a look at our product category table, let me build a simple table here that gets product category name, product category key, and internet sales amount. So normally we wouldn't look at the keys, we just look at the product categories, but notice that the keys are 1, 3, and 4. These are the keys that have got values. There is also if we get rid of the measure, there is also a 4th key here for components, but components doesn't have any data. So this is our data. This is the data in our remote data set. Now, let's imagine that we wanted to join this data with some groupings of some kind. So if I connect to another local source, in this case, this is going to be an Excel file that I've built. I've got this Excel file which groups my product categories into high and low priority groups. And I'm going to connect to it. And there's something that I want you to notice. In this file, I've made a mistake. I've got product categories 2, 3, 4, and 5, but I don't have a row for product category 1, which is bikes. Now, here's the grouping column that I want to use. But look, there is no row for bikes. There is no product category key 1. So if I load this data and go back to here. So there will be another new table here, product category groups. I'm going to join product category key to product category key here. It's making it, I just got to check the cardinality. It'll complain if I say OK now, so I'll just let it check. These things always take longer. I'm worried that it will probably crash if I click OK too early. So I do want to let this finish. All right, I'm going to risk it and click OK. There we go. So I've created the relationship. It's a one-to-one relationship, but look at the kind of problems that you might run into. So at the moment, look, there is bikes visible here because I'm not slicing by anything on that new table. But if I go to my new product category groups table and add group in here as a slicer, and I slice on low priority and high priority. High priority, I see clothing. Low priority, I see accessories. But where is bikes gone? It's only there if I don't select on a grouping. This could be very confusing for your end users. If I take that away and I add group into this table as a new row, Come on. You can see again, bikes has disappeared. And this is all because of that referential integrity problem. So you can imagine in the real world where data is dirty and end users make mistakes, there is all kinds of potential for things to go wrong, for people to get confused about why this isn't working properly. The good news is if you do decide that this is too dangerous for your users to use, there will be a property coming soon called discourage composite models. So when you design a data set, you can prevent anybody building a composite model on top of it if you want. The next thing to point out, and this kind of also goes back to what I was saying earlier, is how the joins between the islands actually do work. And why, when you create a join, a relationship between an island, why you see this potential security risk warning. So people often ask me about this feature. Are these joins happening in memory? Is there something clever happening? Well, no, there is absolutely nothing clever happening at all. What we can do is we can actually look at the queries that are being built against my remote data set, and we can see how the joins are created. And this will help you understand why there's a security risk and why there is a potential performance problem here. So again, let's go back to Power BI Desktop. And let's have a look at our table here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the View tab, go to Performance Analyzer, and I'm just going to start recording and refresh visuals. So here's my demo table. The first thing I notice is this table took over a second to refresh, which is slightly worrying because there's a really small amount of data here. So, this is perhaps my first warning sign. I'm going to go here and I'm going to click Copy Query. And this is going to copy all of the DAX queries that are associated with this particular visual. Now, to view the DAX query, I'm going to open up DAX Studio as an external tool. I'm not going to bother running the queries, but if I paste into this new query editor window, it's realized that what I've pasted in here is something that is actually, there are actually multiple query types. The DAX query that's used to populate the visual, and also the queries that go against the remote data set to get the data. Now, these are the DirectQuery queries, so I want both the DAX and DirectQuery queries. And if we format this and maybe increase the zoom size, this is the DAX query for the visual. But now after the misnamed SQL query section, instead of a SQL query, what I see are the DAX queries against the remote data set to get the data needed for the remote data set. And if I go down here, you can see that there is a very long list of values. What are all of these thousands and thousands of values making a really horrible query? Well, these are the values from the selection on dim customer being passed down through this relationship to the internet sales table. So when I select manual on English occupation here, so let me just zoom in, make that a little bit bigger. That selection gets translated into a list of keys on key values from the customer key column on here, and that gets passed in a DAX query to the internet sales table in my remote data set as this really, really long list of keys. And this is basically why you might get a performance problem, because passing a really long list of keys from one table to another is not going to be an efficient way of running a query. This also, if you think about it, explains why you've got a security risk. Because if I've got data in my local data set that is sensitive, and I'm using, for example, something like, I don't know, in the US, you might have what do they call it? They call it social security numbers. But there may be some kind of national ID number that you're using to identify each customer. If you're using that for the join between your local and remote data set, well, those key values are going to be passed up to the remote data set. And anybody who's got admin rights on the remote data set and can see the queries you're running will therefore see those key values that you're using to do the join. And that might be a security risk. That might mean that you're taking data from your local data set and sending it up to the Power BI service where somebody with admin rights on the remote data set can see those key values and maybe see something that they shouldn't be able to see. So that explains what's going on here. A few last things to point out. In terms of row-level security, row-level security, I think, is still a work in progress at this point in the preview. At the moment, row-level security only works within islands. So if you just define row-level security in a remote data set, it works in the tables in that remote data set. But row-level security does not flow from a remote data set down to a proxy model, to a local data set. And row-level security in one remote data set won't ever flow to another remote data set. So this is something that will probably not change before GA, but this is something where we're also thinking, is this what people want? Should this change? Will this maybe change after GA? Well, we'll have to see. But it's something to bear in mind. Think about how security works when you've got row-level security defined in different places. And as I said, there are going to be lots of other bits of functionality like security which are either not ready yet, or maybe won't even be available until after GA. So for the moment, with the current preview, which is definitely a preview, calculation groups and format strings, sort by column, lots of other things don't work properly right now, but these will be fixed by GA. And functionality will improve also by GA, but there will also be things that change and get improved after GA as well, because this is one of those situations where we do want to listen to feedback from you, the customer. Another very common question that we get is, will this work for on-premises analysis services and not Azure analysis service, not just Azure analysis services? This is something that we are still thinking about actively. I think the announcement blog post says, yes, we are going to do it. I don't want to be so positive, but it will involve a lot of work, and it will definitely only work after the next release of analysis services on premises, vNext. So there is an awful lot of code we would have to add to SQL Server analysis services on-prem to make this work, and that can only be added with the next major release of analysis services on-prem. So even if it does happen, it's not going to happen anytime soon. But overall, this is such an important feature for everybody. This is a feature that we are going to be investing in really heavily going forward. So, use it, test it, see what works, see what doesn't work, and give us feedback. And that feedback will be used by us to make this better and make it do what you want to do. That's the end of my presentation. Thanks for listening. And I can now stick around and take some questions.
Thank you so much, Chris, for taking time off your busy schedule for us. It was really excellent learning for all of us. So if anyone has questions, you can unmute your mic right now and ask Chris, or you can even type your questions down on the chat window. I have one question for you, Chris.
Go on.
When you pull in various data sets into the composite model, is there a limit to the number of islands that you can have?
No, but I don't think there is a limit that we impose, but I would be very careful about having more than 2 or 3 islands, because like I said, the more islands you have, the more likely you are to have relationships which need to go over and between islands. And the more relationships you have that go between islands, the more likely that you will run into performance problems.
Got that. Thank you.
So, for example, I mean, I did hear a while ago somebody asked the question, could I put all of my dimension tables in one data set and all of my fact tables in another data set? And that, I think, is a good example of something that you should not do. If you've got dimensions and fact tables, you will always get the best performance if they are in the same island, in the same data set. So never ever put dimension tables and fact tables that you intend to use together frequently in separate islands, because that's going to be where you risk having real performance problems. There might be situations where you do it and it works, and that's great, but I would strongly suggest that you be careful and don't test what you do and make sure you're getting good performance.
Right, gotcha. Thank you. We also have Stefan Utskun, who has a question. Can you view hidden columns or tables in the remote dataset from the local?
Yes, you should be able to, I think. I would need to test that. I don't think I've got any hidden columns in my remote dataset, so I can't test this right now, but I am pretty sure that you will be able to see them. Because if you can't, it's going to be those key columns that typically are hidden. And if you can't see them, you can't build a relationship, and then you're going to have a problem. You can certainly hide columns in your local data set. So even if you can see hidden columns in the remote data set, you can always hide them again in your own local data set if you need to.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more questions? Okay, so we can move on to the next session. Chris will stick around for a little while, so if you do have questions, please type it in the chat window and Chris might respond on the chat itself.
Cool.
So once again, Chris, thank you so much for being with us. Yeah, it was a pleasure.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So let's move on next to the next feature, the next session, the favorite new feature segment. And we have Nilhan Perera, who's an associate consultant for BI at Fortude, and he will be talking about the new analytics features in Power BI and be showing a quick demo on that. So over to you, Nilhan.
Thanks, Google. Can I be heard?
Yes, you can, and I can see your screen as well.
You can see my screen as well. Super. Okay. So hi everyone. I'm Nilhan Perera, and I'd like to welcome all of you to the favorite new feature segment of the Power BI Community Meetup for February 2021. Sorry, can I be heard now?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Yeah. So a little bit about myself. I'm a part of a dynamic team at Fortude, where I work in the capacity of an associate consultant in BI. I'm a foodie, a tech enthusiast, and also an amateur mobile photographer. So you can also find me on Twitter and LinkedIn on these handles at Nilhan Perera on Twitter and Nilhan Perera on LinkedIn. So coming back to the topic, the latest Power BI update as of now is the December 2020 version. So if you have not updated it as in your personal application so far, I think it would be wise to do so as soon as possible in order to enjoy and make use of the features I'm about to introduce to you. The December update brought in many new improvements and additions to the Power BI platform. Most notably, the ability to use DirectQuery on Power BI datasets and Azure analysis services, the use of small multiples, the introduction of the selection pane on mobile layout view, and the introduction of the Microsoft Dataverse connector, to name a few. So I've listed down the features that came with the December 2020 update here. So if you want to have a look at it in depth, I think it's best that you go and have a look at it on the Power BI blog. So today's segment will be about these two new features that initially came out with the November 2020 update and was subsequently bettered in the December 2020 update. So the first one is the anomaly detection, which is on preview mode. So basically, in other words, the feature is not ready for complete release, but it should work with more situations. So let's hope that it is made a full-on feature in the months to come. And next we've got the Q&A feature, which now supports partial matching data values. Right. So the anomaly detection usually helps you enhance your line charts by automatically detecting anomalies in your time series. So also it also provides explanations for anomalies, which in turn helps with root cause analysis. So say you have some sales data for a list of dates, and there are unusually high sales values on certain days, right? The first thing this feature does is it identifies these values. And apart from that, it analyzes the underlying data set and suggests a list of possible reasons for the unusual values. So I'll get into that during the demo, and I'll show you. So this feature works both on Power BI desktop and also the Power BI service. So to get a little bit more technical, the underlying algorithm used for this anomaly detection is an algorithm called a spectral residual algorithm. So I will paste the link on the chat probably after the session, so that you could have a look at it and gain some knowledge in depth. So a couple of things to keep in mind when using this feature is that it is only supported by the line chart visuals containing time series data in the axis field. It also does not support legends, multiple values, or secondary values in the line chart visual. It requires a minimum of 12 data points to work. And other analysis features such as the forecast, mean, max, average, median, and percentile lines do not work hand in hand with the anomaly detection feature. Then apart from that, the DirectQuery over SAP data source, Power BI report server, live connections to Azure analysis services, and SQL Server analysis services aren't supported. And the explanations does not work with the show value as option. And also the drilling down to go to the next level of the hierarchy is not supported. Also with the December 2020 update, this feature was also made available on the mobile application. Now let's have a look at a demo with regard to the anomaly detection. Right. So the first thing we need to do when you open up Power BI desktop is to turn on this feature. So how you do that is you go on to File, Options and Settings, Options, and on the Options window you've got a tab that says Preview Features, where you get a list of features that are on preview mode, and just look for anomaly detection. So I've already selected it here, so you could select it as well and click on OK. So basically, if you're using this for the first time, Power BI will prompt you to restart the application in order for this feature to start working. So for the purpose of this demo, I have used the AdventureWorks data warehouse database and created a simple model over it. So just let's get into building a simple line chart with date on the axis and total sales amount as values. So let's quickly select the line chart visual, drag and drop date on the axis, and select total sales amount as a value. So the data set here is a little large, so let's just restrain it to the year 2012. Yeah, super. Okay, so basically on the analytics tab, you'll find this find anomalies option, which which is made available once you activate, as in basically turn on the anomaly detection feature. So what we can do is, let's add one. So over here you see it has detected a couple of anomalies, right? Further to that, you can also format these anomalies. For example, you can change the shape, the size of the shape, and you can of course change the color, and so on. So apart from that, there's an option called sensitivity. So basically what happens in sensitivity is when you increase the sensitivity, the number of anomalies detected increases as well, because even the slightest deviation from a value that it detects as normal will be shown up as an anomaly. So apart from the anomaly detection feature, this feature also explains the possible reasons for the fluctuation. So basically what Power BI does is it runs an analysis across the fields in the data model to figure out these possible explanations. So let's click on this anomaly here, right? So it says, right, so what it does here is it gives you a reason as to why it has selected this value as an anomaly, and it gives you an explanation in natural language. For example, it says total sales amount was unexpectedly low on Saturday, the 3rd of March 2012. It has a value of 11,059, which is below the expected range of between 15,904 and 27,979. So now let's look at changing up the sensitivity. So let's decrease it to something like 42%. Yeah. And see, so now the number of anomalies detected has reduced. So let's select this anomaly once again, and here the anomaly is unexpectedly high as opposed to the one we looked at before, right? So what happens here is Power BI also gives a possible set of explanations, and it is usually ordered by the strength. So let's have a look at what strength means. So basically it shows the degree to which each value is correlated with the anomaly. The higher the strength means it may have had greater impact, right? So apart from this, say you want, so you have a couple of explanations given here, and then you want, to customize it and maybe, have get an idea of it based on a different attribute. So in this example, let's, for example, select something like model name and add it to the explain by area and apply it. Yeah, so what happens is now it explains it by, gives a possible explanation by the model name. So the model name here is road 550W. Yeah, so it says the total sales amount for the model name road 550W was unusually high, which may have lifted the total sales amount, which can be true because if you notice the line chart related to the total sales amount for that particular model name, you can see that the peaks correlate with the anomalies that have been suggested. You can also go on to add this to the report for better user experience and for better analysis. Then apart from that, it can also be sliced. So for example, if you select Australia or Europe, see, you get the anomalies, but these anomalies have been filtered by this region, right? So let's also have a look at a couple of limitations that I spoke about as well. So basically what we can do is we can try adding a percentile line here, right? So let's add a percentile line. So now you can notice that the anomalies that were shown here before are not there anymore. And you can also see that the find anomalies option has been grayed out. So if you hover on top of this warning sign, it says if a visual has reference lines on it, anomaly detection only works with either trend line or constant line for now. So like I said before, the min line, max line, average line, and the median line along with the percentile line does not work hand in hand with find anomalies. So as soon as you remove the percentile line, it shows you all the anomalies that have been detected. Okay. So now with that, let's also have a look at the updated Q&A feature. Right, so having a look at this feature, well, it is a fast and a very interesting way of visualizing data with a simple request using natural language. So after all, it's always easier to just ask, right? So initially, with the initial release of this particular feature, the exact keyword needed to be used to obtain the correct data. So for example, if you wanted revenue, the value of revenue for a particular company, for example, say Alpha Gamma, you would have to type in show me the total revenue of Alpha Gamma. But now with the new update, you can use something like use sentence like total revenue of company Alpha, and what it does is it will return the partial matching values based on what you have searched for. So let's also have a look at that as well. Yeah. So using the same data set, let's insert Q&A visual here. And then let's ask a basic question with the data that we know of. So for example, let's look at the total sales value for bikes. Say total sales for, right? And here it gives you the total sales amount for bikes. So say that you want to see the total sales amount for mountain bikes and you type in total sales value for, say, mount. So notice here that it gives you a recommended search based on this. So you have a wide range of suggestions that it has given. So for example, you have the total sales value for Mountain 300, which is a model name, Mountain 400W, and these are all based on the city or the product name. So let's just further define it and say Mountain, say bike. And here right on top you see the total sales value for mountain bike. So basically what it has done here is it has looked at the two words that have been given, the two keywords, and it in return has sent out a couple of suggestions, right? So we can also have a look at this in terms of a table. So for example, we can say as table, and it will show you the total sales amount as a table, and also a line chart. So say for example, you can say for years. Yeah, as line chart, and then it will give you basically display a line chart, basically a line chart across all the years with the total sales amount for mountain bikes. So this feature, along with the anomaly detection feature, has basically improved the BI experience on the Power BI platform. So let's just all hope that it is further improved by Microsoft, and because it is quite an interesting feature and it adds a lot of depth into reporting as well. So with that, I'd like to end the segment on the new favorite new feature. So if you have any further questions regarding these, please feel free to drop your questions on the chat, and we will get back to you shortly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nilhan.
Thanks, Google. Thanks for that.
So if you have any questions for Nilhan, you can type it in the chat window. and when we go to the rest of the session of the event. So we have our community site up here on the link that you can see. Please go be a member of this one so that you can be part of the wider community and involve yourself in helping each other out. It's still a small group over there on this site, so we plan to make it bigger. So we need your support for that. There are a lot of people who have questions on the Power BI user group, so where you can contribute and you can also have your questions answered as well. On the announcements, there is just one announcement. It's just to say that we have put up the Power BI community YouTube channel. So all videos of all recordings of sessions will be here from now on. So this is the link that I pasted on the chat. So please visit this, subscribe if you'd like to. All sessions have been categorized as well. So if you go into one particular video, you will see that and click on show more. You can skip to or you can jump to each different section or to each different session easily. So yes, so that's it. That's all we have for this week or this month. We hope to see you all next month as well. So thank you for joining us.